136th contact Tuesday, October 14th, 1980, 11:41 p.m. Billy, I am tremendously glad that you came. Semjase, 1. Last week, we did not have enough time, I know. 2. You still wanted to discuss some things with me. 3. Now is the time. Billy, it concerns our quite precarious financial situation. I wanted to ask you in this connection whether or not my idea is a good one, which is that we look for work that we can perform ourselves at home so that we do not only have to work abroad. Semjase, 4. Certainly, the idea is of good value, but it might not be able to be realized as quickly as what is, indeed, necessary for you. Billy, and why not? Semjase, 5. Are you yourself aware of the full consequences of your serious financial situation? Billy, recently, I handed you a list with the request that you would look this over and then give us the appropriate advice. Semjase, 6. We have surely already done this. 7. And my advice that was given last week concerning these interests corresponded to our detailed examination of the facts. Billy, yes, and? Semjase, 8. Are you really not aware of all of the consequences? Billy, in recent months, I have no longer occupied myself with the financial situation. I only did this last week because there were bills to pay, for which no money was available. Semjase, 9. And, of course, you've paid them back with funds that you've borrowed, as I know. 10. It is high time that the group members remove Elsie from the financial sector and that you learn to take over this matter. Billy, I see that you have already contemplated this again. Then now you must know this well. Semjase, 11. It is not right how you act. 12. You're the one who, in every respect, does the most important and comprehensive and rigorous work, and furthermore, you have accumulated a financial debt on your behalf, just so that you can keep everyone who would be responsible for the building of the center and all things from sinking. 13. This is in no way right and is very regrettable. 14. As we have calculated, today, a debt rests upon you which lies on the border of 90,000 francs. 15. And all this for expenses that must basically go to the expense of the group members, who also have a large financial debt to be repaid themselves, together with ongoing expenses. Billy, we are neither your financial geniuses nor rich. Semjase, 16. Nevertheless, the budget should have been led differently before it came as far as it stands today. 17. Everything can now only be saved by a radical measure, which must also begin already in the month of November. 18. If this date is not kept, then it will still take, at the latest, 6 months before the collapse finally becomes unavoidable because the debt repayment rates will rise immeasurably for you. 19. Already in the month of November, you must apply a monthly average of around 7,500 francs towards the necessary payments and the debt repayments. 20. This amount, however, will unstoppably increase each additional month for you if you cannot collect it, whereby the amount mentioned is to be paid monthly for about 6 years. 21. Still, you will be able to make this payment. However, it represents the outermost limit of your capabilities if our advice concerning the work is followed, as I explained last week. 22. In addition to this, you are to be concerned with procuring work, including any that can be performed at the center during any free minutes. Otherwise, the required amount will not be reached. 23. In addition to all of this, it is necessary that you finally take the financial management into your own hands and regulate everything in the best manner. 24. This is the only way that you can be saved from this serious situation and overcome the difficulties. 25. You only have about 3 weeks of time to begin the necessary financing in order to be able to regulate everything and lead it to success. 26. This means that you need to take all of the financing away from Elsie because she does not understand anything about this but only manages the debt in a thoughtless manner. Billy: okay, a counter-speech would probably be senseless. Nevertheless, I would like to say that the accounting should be led further by Abby under my control, while Jacobus keeps his office as treasurer. That would already help me tremendously. Semjase, 27. Nothing is to be objected if you maintain control over this. 28. What you absolutely still have to do, however, is this. 29. Sit out tomorrow or the following day and gather all data and facts, in order, then, to prepare an exact account with a budget plan and the payback possibilities. 30. Then, submit to me your exact plan, and I will then get together with a friend for advice if necessary, one who is concerned with such earthly matters. Billy: and where should I find this friend, then? Semjase, 31. This concerns a friend on my end, one from our own ranks. Billy: oh so, and, you think that he might be able to advise me? Semjase, 32. Surely, because he has concerned himself for 4 months with the earthly financial system. Billy: hectares, and he thinks that. Semjase, 33. You forget that completely different learning opportunities are offered to us. Billy: oh, of course, I forgot. But I will strive in a good manner and after the best opportunities toward this unpleasant task, even if I completely have to go against the grain. But I would still like to say that I want to form a group within the group, with which I can carry out this work, and I could exercise control over it. My experience tells me that in such things, a certain caution must be taken because only too quickly, one can fall under the suspicion of the earth people that one pushes his finances into their own pockets. Indeed, I already have enough enemies who, only too gladly, would want to slide such machinations into my shoes. Semjase, 34. Sure, I understand your desire, and it is not so unreasonable. 35. Similar things have already repeatedly been imputed to you by several group members. Billy: exactly. But despite everything, there will be a problem, namely Elsie. I doubt whether her reasoning and her own stubbornness is sufficient for her to understand everything and all of the requirements. If she has already exclaimed that when the Moor had done his duty, it was just so that he could go, then I guess all kinds of things just aren't right in the land of Bohemia anymore. Semjase, 36. That was very thoughtless and unjust of her, but it can be hoped that she reflects upon her reasoning and sees all things in the right light again and then, accordingly, begins to act correctly. 37. In addition to this, there is something else that the other group members must properly recognize. 38. If one of you can truly find work that can be performed in the center, then furnish your night watch in such a way that alternately per night, 2 group members perform the watch. During that time, however, they should work on reaching the required financial means. 39. For 2 days apiece, the 2 group members should alternate themselves between the watch and the work, before the next 2 members take over this task for the following 2 days. 40. The arrangement of the night watch, then, should be that your wife and Ava divide the watch and the work between themselves, then Jacobus and Madeleine, then Elsie and Bernadette, and then Engelbert together with Mary. 41. Also, any possible leisure time should be spent towards the necessary work. Otherwise, the required amount will not be acquired. Billy: that's a damn hard route. Semjase, 42. Certainly, but unfortunately, it's unavoidable. Billy: hopefully, we can find suitable work and, moreover, within the required period of time. I'm clumsy with just one hand. Semjase, 43. You are not to participate in this work because you should finally try to do over again everything that you have neglected to do throughout all of the recent years. 44. That is several times greater and harder work than what is to be performed by the group members as a result of the serious financial situation. Billy, nevertheless, I will also work if the time permits me and if I need a little variety. Semjase, 45. Yes, certainly. You cannot omit that, and you also cannot go without variety, as I know. 46. You can try this, but you cannot neglect the work for the mission any longer. 47. You should promise me this. Billy, I give you my promise. Semjase, 48. Your time will often be lacking for you, however, because you will occasionally be absent from the center. Billy, what do you mean by that? Semjase, 49. I speak of the fact that during the coming months and years, we will often order you to us and will still have different jobs for you to perform other than just those dealing with moderate instruction work. Billy, do you mean that I will not only have to perform my dictating and writing tasks? Semjase, 50. Surely, because we still have different tasks for you, and we have also planned to inform you about different interests. Billy, you're joking with me. Semjase, 51. This must be, however. Billy, well, then it shall be. By the way, things will already start to get somewhat better with the writing, once you transmit the reports to me. Semjase, 52. Sure, I know. 53. But you should still pay very much attention to your health. Billy, it has, however, improved tremendously. Semjase, 54. Certainly. Nevertheless, mindfulness and caution are necessary. Billy, of course, it has already looked bad enough. Semjase, 55. That is correct. 56. Some has improved itself, but now you must prepare for your circulatory system difficulties. They will lead to a health collapse in at least 2 years if you do not concern yourself better with this. Billy, it will certainly improve again. Semjase, 57. That is to be hoped for. 58. But now, my friend, I would like to speak of those things concerning the future, which I promised to reveal to you at this time. Billy, fine, then fire away. Semjase, 59. Sure, so listen. 60. It will be. Billy, one moment, please, because I still have a question, before I forget it. Semjase, 61. Just ask. Billy, good, thank you. To what extent is it necessary that the group members become involved in the work? Semjase, 62. Even if only one does not invest himself into this necessary measure, then a quick end will be inevitable. 63. In addition, it is necessary that those group members, who are not residents of the center and who only stay there occasionally, also cooperate. Billy, good, that is clear. Then I would still like to ask about the time that you explained to me when, within some years, everything should have progressed so far that we would not have to work outside of the center anymore. Semjase, 64. That was before we knew the precise data. 65. After its cognizance, we have now recognized that the time will not be sufficient for some years if you cannot find significant employment that brings enough money into the center. 66. This would also mean that external employment would still need to be executed for at least about 12 years. 67. But this will allow itself to be regulated, as the coming time will prove. 68. New insights, which we received during a look into the future, promise that there is hardly a livelihood to be found in the center without external employment. 69. Yet we await this because much can still change in this relation, even though it does not look likely in the distant future. Billy, Thus, we wait. Semjase, 70. Sure, because we must first see how everything will turn out in the coming time. 71. We can't give ourselves high hopes, however, because one of the two possibilities of our look into the future shows that a livelihood resulting from work being performed in the center looks bleak. Billy, well, that is clear. Now, I have a question about the teachings and the corresponding examinations. Semjase, 72. Obviously, the lessons must be learned and be moderately studied further, but in accordance with the given circumstances, we must make some mandatory restrictions and exercise a certain indulgence. 73. This does not mean, however, that we can accept non-effort and non-learning. 74. We will simply make certain restrictions and exercise a little indulgence. Billy, I find this to be right, but how are the examinations going to be accomplished now, and how does it stand with the printing of additional books? Semjase, 75. With respect to the tests, I will instruct you during my next visit on Thursday or Friday because we still have some points to clarify in this regard. 76. Concerning the making of additional books, the arrangement that we already made is valid for the fulfillment of the 12-month period. If the 12 months prove themselves to be useful, then you should be producing 1 to 3 more books per year in the printing process, whereby these annually running enterprises, depending on the scale, will require a sum of 25,000 francs to be used. Billy, does it lie in our sole discretion, then, as to which writings we allow to be printed? Semjase, 77. Sure. Billy, good. I think that this is fair. Do you have, in this connection, still further things for us? Semjase, 78. No. Billy, very well, then I only have a question regarding the Pfeifenberger family and still a final question regarding the instruction of Madeleine, Dorrit, and Rose. I have carefully considered this point myself in the meantime, whereby I have also discovered that they, like also my wife, have very great difficulties with learning. Their problem, however, is actually with the language. For me, I simply have problems with time if I should also still settle these additional tasks. It would be much easier if the group members concerned would simply note all of those things that are unintelligible to them as questions, after which I could then take the time, at my sole discretion, to discuss those questions with them. Semjase, 79. Sure, that is acceptable. 80. You can handle it in such a way. 81. Regarding your wife, I know that quite severe linguistic problems exist for her because the German language is in no way as familiar as the Swiss German language. 82. For this reason, it is appropriate that you dedicate yourself to her in this regard, particularly for all of those things that she is not able to understand. 83. On the other hand, it is also necessary that she gets together with someone else, in order also to learn in such a way. Billy, the latter she will do together with Beetle, but only when both feel in the mood for it. 1. Semjase, 84. Sure. 85. It should, therefore, become a definitive form. Billy, of course, but teaching Earth females something is often worse than trying to teach a donkey how to brush its teeth. Semjase, 86. You are wrong about that. Billy, you were very careless. Semjase, 87. I don't understand. Billy, one might interpret your words, like also mine, in such a way that you are misogynistic, as this has often been said about me. Semjase, 88. But this is as far from you as it also is from me. Billy, of course, but you forget the role and position of women on Earth. Semjase, 89. But only because it sometimes appears to be an insurmountable thing to explain the logic of something to an Earth woman. Billy, of course, but this doesn't want to be understood. It is then said that one wants to suppress women. Instead of it being accepted that one wants to teach them and give them the same rights as men, it is then, instead, completely misunderstood and one falls under her hostility. Semjase, 90. That is extremely illogical. Billy, it is, however, still the case. Semjase, 91. I didn't say that in regards to your explanation, but because it is actually like that. Billy, oh, I see. Now, the women just always think that you want to wipe them out and trample them underfoot. I'm sorry, you don't understand. By you, I, of course, mean someone, thus, that someone wants to wipe them out and trample them underfoot. Semjase, 92. The earthly women were, unfortunately, kept away from all knowledge and all rights for many millennia, which is why they still live in this role today. Billy, right. But now, let's talk about the future. I did, indeed, interrupt you. Semjase, 93. I will begin with this shortly, but for the time being, there is still the first part of your question, which I still have to answer. 94. I discussed with you in detail about Ferdinand and Ingrid in regards to their new residence and its construction. 95. I contemplated whether they are determined to make a branch center out of this home for you and carry out the necessary work in Austria. 96. If they are willing to do this, then it will be of necessity that you go there and thoroughly inspect everything, in order to give them the appropriate and necessary guidance. 97. It will, unfortunately, be additional work for you, but it is also inescapable work. Billy, this would give me some variety and be a nice change of air for me. Only, it isn't completely clear to me as to how I am to cooperate in giving advice on the construction. Semjase, 98. This will surely occur, for when you inspect everything, you will already know what your task will be. 99. In any event, it is essential to ensure that a separate workspace is provided for you, according to your purpose and for you alone, because you will often be there and will work if everything can actually be furnished, which, however, is very questionable because during a look into the future, I could not make a corresponding determination. Billy, you already know a great deal of things. Semjase, 100. Which brings us back to the subject, which would be, namely, the future. Billy, right, then yes, you can now begin. Semjase, 101. I will do this. Otherwise, we will drift more and more away from it. 102. Thus, it will happen, that the future will bring events which, on the one hand, will have a very malicious effect on the world and earth people but which, on the other hand, will only be confirmation of what has been announced prophetically for several thousand years. 103. Especially now, it also confirms what has been said since ancient times, that the Israeli people originally never were an actual people, but that this massive people, in ancient times, singly and alone consisted of a gigantic group of degenerate and partially even criminal elements, who during their existence on earth at that time only incited discord, falseness and war. 104. Having come forth from the ones who were expelled, because they would not obey any order and were criminal, they assembled together in a mob in ancient times and formed the Shem people of the Hebrews, the Gypsies, who in their megalomania and in selfishness and egoism, named themselves a chosen people, who wanted to take up an elevated and ruling position over all terrestrial peoples, as is indeed known to you. 105. But you also know that this Shem people over a very long time always reached its goals, however, always only through murder, arson, the betrayal of friendships, and intrigues, and so forth, whereby they, the original forefathers of today's Israelis, were truly masters. 106. Their distant descendants now, today's Israelis, that is their responsible ones and their myrmidons, can, like the USA, commit the worst crimes pitilessly and unhindered and with their secret services and military, right before the eyes of the world at large, and even with their approval. 107. Not only that the Secret Service and military have criminal elements and trustworthy friends in many nations of Earth, who they, as ever, simply brutally and bloodthirstily butcher as needed and to reach their goals. No, they also have, again like the USA, through their intrigues, also understood how to make the appropriate friends in the governments, the economic concerns in banks, and so forth, or even creep into these themselves, so that their power has already grown to the degree that this cannot be grasped and perceived by Earth humans anymore. 108. The last World War, the second, through which millions of Jews were massacred, which was truly unjust as you know, carries the great blame that this could even happen to such a degree, also because the USA with its allies decided the war in their favor. 109. But blinded by that and full of false pity, Earth humans seek the friendship of the violent ones but who in no way merit this friendship and only take advantage of it for their criminal purposes. 110. A fact. Billy, man alive, you must be damned cautious about what you say here, because all of this could be interpreted as being neo-fascist and anti-Jewish. You also know that anti-Semitic machinations and the like constantly led to legal procedures and even worse. Semjase, 112. But these explanations are necessary for what I have to tell you in this context. Billy, that may well be, but in spite of that, it is dangerous. It could endanger our entire mission, or at least attract murder attempts around my neck again. Semjase, 113. If you are frightened, then we can abandon our mission. Billy, certainly not, but I ask myself whether I did right in this, to have questioned you regarding future events, when you now so openly speak of these things, which correspond to truth as I know, but which are damned hot. Semjase, 114. I would have also spoken about it, if you had not asked me about future matters. Billy, I understand. Seemingly the coming world situation requires this. Semjase, 115. Sure. Billy, but, in spite of that, this means quite a damned danger. Semjase, 116. That also is correct, and it especially means a very great danger for yourself and for your life, because the fewest Earth humans will understand and want to understand, that we only speak the truth and only spread the truth regarding these things, and that we ourselves, as well as you, in spite of that, regarding the people themselves, do not possess anti-American and anti-Israeli ambitions in any form and in regard to the integrity of these countries. 117. Only few will understand that we only object to the murderous and false machinations of these named groups of Earth humans, and have to warn the rest of mankind about them, being the criminal state powers and the myrmidons and servants who belong to them, who, for their delusion and fanaticism as well as for their serfdom and profit greed, go, without consideration, over corpses, murdering, destroying and terrorizing. Billy, naturally, but this explanation will probably not help much. Semjase, 118. That may be, however some will absorb the truth in spite of that. Billy, that's a lot of damned use to me, if I'm thereby to go to hell. Semjase, 119. You can unfetter yourself from your duty, if you are afraid, which you have, however, never done before. Billy, naturally not, because you indeed know that I cannot simply break a given promise. On the other hand, I ask myself why you suddenly came upon the crazy idea that I should be afraid. Should this perhaps be a psychological trick, to cause me to persevere? Do you want to strike at my honor, so to speak, and thereby also address my own feelings of honor? That would be quite mean of you, because you know very precisely that I then. Semjase, 120. You lose yourself in words, which you yourself do not accept as given. 121. And you know also, that I would never approach you with such ulterior motives. Billy, naturally, that would also be new to me. I only wanted to know the depth of your thoughts. Therefore calmly tell me further, I will persevere, whether the devil comes out or stays in. Semjase, 122. I knew that. Billy, then the small skirmish was superfluous. Semjase, 123. Sure. 124. But now listen, 125. What I have already said, I had to explain, because the following can only be understood thereby. 126. You know about the intrigues of the responsible ones, which are established through their secret service, and are advanced or set off through revolutions and wars throughout the world. 127. But you also know that through the American, Soviet and Israeli Secret Service, assassination attempts and political murders are committed in very great numbers, and that the same secret services set off political confusions and topple governments, and so forth. 128. But what is still unknown to you and the Earth humans is the fact that in many revolutions and small wars the powers directly take part and commit monstrous crimes. 129. Not only that they do not submit to the world order regarding atomic regulations, and continue to conduct nuclear trials and so forth, and consequently contravene all rules and regulations, no, they also pilfer and rob the required materials by murder and manslaughter. 130. But far worse things yet are carried out through the military and through the Secret Service, in that they directly interfere in revolutions and wars of other peoples, and commit hundredfold and thousandfold murders. 131. This, however, they do in the cunning and infamous manner, that everything looks as if the directly involved ones, or any subgroups of these, are the guilty ones. 132. Thus have the United States, America and Israel already also directly interfered in the war between Iraq and Iran, in the breaking out of which they were likewise not involved. 133. Secret Service Special Commandos, chiefly in Iraq, commit criminal and war criminal acts and undertakings, as also Israeli bombers openly bombard principal Iraqi positions, cities and atomic and oil centers, with the assumption that it would not be noticed that this concerns their military interference and their murderous cunning. 134. However, they deceive themselves in this regard, because at least we are aware of their filthy machinations and let these be given world publicity through you. Billy, and you are of the opinion that the Earth humans will take this off of me, if I lay this before them or try to explain? Semjase, 135. A small group will recognize that you speak the truth. Billy, that's much use then. Just consider that at this time there are more than 4 billion humans, who must be convinced of the truth. Especially in the United States, America and Israeli-friendly Switzerland, as well as in Germany, France and in America, hell will be made hot for me when I spread your explanations further. Semjase, 136. Sure, because in these nations especially the evil powers have made many friends in governments and among the people, or they have their own people sit in authoritative governments and in the economic and financial world. Billy, and it is still supposed to be simple for me? Semjase, 137. I never uttered such a word. 138. Neither I nor anyone else of us thinks that the task is easy for you. 139. We also know that for you, life will be more difficult and the dangers will be greater yet. Billy, how nice, but indeed to every prayer also belongs an amen. Is that certain? Semjase, 140. Sure. Billy, good, I will indeed do what must be done. I am indeed used to annoyance. But why does it work out to always be these military and secret services? Already in earlier times it was them, and also today it is them again. Semjase, 141. And it will still continue to be them further in the future. Billy, and the humans become no smarter. Then cheers. Semjase, 142. Unfortunately, it will still remain like this for a long time, as it will also be that the religions still long exercise power over the earth humans and exploit them and lead them astray, this next to the military and secret services. Billy, that is well known, and yet this also cannot be changed. Semjase, 143. Sure, but still there exists no possibility to change this situation greatly. 134. The possibility exists only in the form in which you conduct it. 135. Small groups are required, which will spread in snowball fashion. 136. But now, my friend, enough of that, because I still have to tell you about all kinds of important data and facts concerning the future, which I cannot explain in a few minutes. 137. So I will likewise tell of the next upcoming events, which will become well known worldwide when they fulfill themselves. 138. The first concerns the ballot for the new American president. 149. It will be expressed worldwide that the lesser of two evils must be chosen. Therefore, the current President Carter will not hold his position any longer. 150. For this reason, the next great man of the United States of America will be President Ronald Reagan. 151. A man who will cause everything to align through his upcoming actions, allowing the old prophecies to be fulfilled, from which it will slowly yet surely result that everything will begin to expand on the earth for the preparation of the worldwide war. 152. The new president will be aggressive and eager to solve all problems through the use of military force and new armaments. 153. This in contrast to his predecessor, who is likewise unsuitable, however, in his present position, as the new president will also be, who already exhibits some radical and extreme characteristics. 154. Contrary to the erroneous opinion of the United States and the worldwide population, Reagan does not represent the lesser evil but rather the larger, as the Earth people will find out. 155. In general, it can be said that very great errors are committed in regards to earthly presidential elections and the fact that after 2, 3, or 4 years, a new presidency is always sought, and then, a new president is determined for a country. 156. Each new president lives with different ambitions and emotions, but also, each new president has a different character, different plans, and different illogical understandings in reference to politics, etc. 157. This leads to the fact that each new president or other person of power ignores and changes the preceding plans of his predecessor, whereby new errors develop again and again. 158. The only right way would be for a truly good man to be chosen in the election, one who is free from all of those interests that are wrong and confused. 159. This man would then be in office for as long as he is able to perform this role consciously and without confusion. 160. Only in this way could steady and good politics develop, expand, and become effective. 161. After the presidential election in America, the next world-changing event will be that in Italy, the next major earthquake after Al-Asnam will occur, to which 4,000 Earth people will fall victim. 162. This quake will occur in the areas of the southwest, south, and southeast, as well as east of the Vesuvius volcano, causing immense damage to the buildings. 163. The first major quake, having great destructive power and causing thousands of deaths, will result towards the end of the month of November of this year, after which then, over long periods of time, new tremblings of the earth will drive the populations into fear, as this will also be the case in Alasnum, where for the first time, the earth will no longer come completely to rest, and 50 to 80 earthquakes will roll daily through the soil. 164. In Alasnum, the number of deaths will, indeed, be 1,000 times higher than what will happen in Italy, but a greater danger awaits this in the Boot country. 165. The severe quake around Vesuvius will only be the beginning of a great number of similar disasters in Italy, but it should also be the starting point for further coming eruptions of the volcano, which will create more destruction in the future. 166. The threatening eruptions of the volcano, however, will indicate that another world war comes within easy reach and that its destructive work will begin and be carried out, without it being able to be prevented, if the political and religious unreasonableness of the earth humans should continue. 167. For 2,000 years, the earth human being was given prophecies about these threats, but he only laughed at them, and all advice that was given was simply spoken into the wind. 168. But he must bear the consequences for more and more of his senselessness. 169. And the events in Italy should be the signs of this coming time, for since ancient times, the most monstrous crimes against earth humanity were committed by this country, namely through Catholicism, whereby the Holy See, in particular, is responsible for this. 170. Already in the beginning time, when the papacy and the Vatican were founded and brought to life in Rome, the most negative place existing in Italy was unconsciously selected for the residence of the Pope, the city of Rome, where the Vatican resided, from which, for almost 2,000 years, murder, enslavement, exploitation, deception, and every possible crime spread across the earthly world, and even other worlds in the universe and in distant, foreign galaxies didn't remain spared from these vile, murderous, religious, and deadly deeds because innocent extraterrestrial visitors on Earth were confronted with the madness of the religious cult of the Vatican and, therefore, Catholicism, and succumbed to this delusional faith, and after their return to their home worlds, their people living there were also infected by the acquired delusional faith until religious wars broke out, and that is why entire planets and even enormous solar systems have been destroyed. 171. The Earth human being should consider these facts at once and recognize from them how deadly the earthly religious cults truly are. 172. And the Earth person should also think about why in ancient times Italy, the most negative place, was ever unconsciously chosen for the creation of the Vatican and why just from there, like many times before, the mark of death is set for the world, when the Vesuvius volcano ejects its lava and thereby spreads great disaster. 173. These are the facts, and it would be worthwhile for the people of the earth to think about them. 174. Just as before and just as ever, however, there will be know-it-alls and cult religious believers who will say that the Vesuvius volcano is not in or near Rome but rather is in the vicinity of Naples. 175. These know-it-alls, however, do not know the conditions of the interior of the earth, much like even the responsible scientists. 176. Thus, they do not know that the main activity of the volcano does not lie directly under it but lies directly and very deeply beneath the city of Rome, so in addition, those areas which will be shaken at the end of November will be caused partly by the magma eruption, water, and gas chambers and be caused partly by tectonic shifts. 177. This is to be said of the coming quakes in Italy, which find their beginning at the end of November of this year and which will not end for a long time. 178. But I must now depart from my identifying in chronological order the events that are coming and return to this later. 179. Before other major earthquakes follow in Italy, still several other things that are serious or simply important and moving for Earth humanity will occur around the world. 180. Thus, the earthquake disaster in Italy will still be on the lips of the Earth human beings when the next event occurs, which will deeply move millions of people. 181. In New York, it will happen that in the second week of December of this year, a man who is well known by the name of John Lennon will be murdered by a firearm. 182. His character is that he is a musician, and he was formerly a member of the Beatles group. 183. He will be murdered by a religiously misguided one named Chapman, who, moreover, suffers from delusional ideas caused by erroneous religious teachings, as this will appear more and more in the extreme with those who've succumbed to the delusional religious cults and sects in the United States of America. 184. Another event goes into action with the coming climate, which will already be at hand in October and which especially concerns the northern hemisphere of the Earth. 185. I already explained to you earlier that in the specific case, the whole Earth will slowly become a flood-prone area. 186. However, the climate will also continue to change in such a way that icy cold weather will fall over the regions of the Earth because a new cooling time inevitably approaches, whereby the overall view of the Earth will change once again. 187. In the north, completely domesticated birds already begin annually to draw to the warmer south for the winter, and already in 100 years, these feathered animals will no longer have a home in the north. 188. Today, many animals still living in the northern areas migrate, on the other hand, to the south, or they already begin to change themselves in their entire anatomy, etc., in order to adapt themselves to the new and approaching cold climate. 189. Many kinds will begin to change themselves into other forms, which can be determined soon by the earthly scientists, whereby they can then exist in the new climate. 190. Thus, the picture of the animal world will, at other times, change itself, and new forms of final life will revive the soil, while the earth human being must also take upon himself many changes and cannot avoid the renewed change. 191. The signs of the times will increase continuously, whereby these signs are always, unfortunately, of a negative form. 192. There are signs, which have been called for since ages ago in the prophecies, but the earth human being did not pay any attention to these. 193. He would have been very much able to prevent these dreadful events from happening if the prophecies would have been attentively followed and if he would have taken good heed of them. 194. He always ignored them, however, and he disturbed the entire planet itself, as well as all of its life forms. 195. But now he will receive his wages for this, which will be very bitter. 196. The time has now come, in which all things increase negatively and the prophecies literally begin to fulfill themselves. 197. The culprits, in particular, have been called to account and have been eliminated, but only until they arrange greater havoc. 198. There are also those who won't be spared from their destruction, who have slandered extraterrestrials and, through their lies that they have created about us, live in material glory. 199. All those who have accumulated greedy profits from our existence and created false cult religious sects, associations, and organizations built on lies, saying that they would stand in contact with us or other extraterrestrial life forms and that we would advocate the cult religions, will have an evil end and die by their own believers or at least be ostracized by them. 200. In particular, those frauds are called to account by their believers, who steal your material and try to evaluate this in their favor. 201. There have already been many who have done this, and there will still be many more in the future, but it will be the case that their shameful actions will bring them harm sooner or later. 202. And now, further chronological predictions concerning the coming months and years are as follows. 203. Around the time of January 19, 1981, Japan will be shaken by an earthquake, which we have calculated at about a strength of 8 on the Richter scale known to you. 204. This quake, which will occur without causing major catastrophes, despite its strength, will be deemed as a sign of the completion of the Iranian-American hostage affair. 205. On the same day at 9:30 p.m., the American hostages are to be released, but this will be prevented by the power of the Ayatollah Khomeini because he will want to meet with the departing American President Jimmy Carter and, therefore, will not grant him the victory. 206. For this reason, at the last moment, he will prevent the release of the prisoners so that this release won't occur until the next day, January 20, 1981, at around 6:23 p.m. 207. For the time being, this will end the largest criminal extortion on the face of the earth, which will, however, have very serious consequences for the Iranian people and their government at a later time. 208. The first time, the Iranians will be of the wrong opinion that they have achieved a victory by the criminal extortion and subsequent release of the prisoners, but they will soon recognize all sorts of the inconvenience and ruin that they bargained for. 209. But their remorse and insight into their crazy direction and into their fanaticism will come too late. 210. In particular, the United States President, Ronald Reagan, will emphasize his power in order to retaliate against Iran. 211. And that this will be so, like also many other very senseless and terrible things that lead to murder and war, is ensured by a man who works closely with President Reagan, namely a war and intrigue fanatic, like Reagan himself, a man named Haig, who has already caused much political mischief. 212. In particular, Reagan will become unforgiving towards Iran when he is informed more precisely about the fact that though the United States hostages in Tehran had to suffer under torture and still have more to suffer. 213. The next events in chronological sequence are that Indonesia will be shaken by an earthquake, which will kill several hundred people, while on the same day, namely on January 24, 1981, China will also be afflicted by another major earthquake in the territory of the province of Sichuan. 214. There will be many deaths to lament over, which will be calculated in the thousands. 215. As usual, however, the Chinese authorities will indicate a much smaller number of victims than what corresponds to the truth. 216. In addition to such serious and tragic events, other things will happen in the world, such as in the field of crime. 217. To make any predictions about this in a graduated form would be pointless because the entire level of crime in all countries is heavily rising. 218. Thus, it is only worthwhile to say something about such issues in chronological order, and only then if it is of interest for the whole or a large part of the world's population. 219. With our calculations, we have not only discovered serious criminal matters, but also innumerable insignificant issues that would only interest a few human beings. 220. Under these insignificant criminal incidents, events will also enter again and again, which I personally find to be amusing, in spite of the criminal background. 221. Thus, I have noted 2 events that will happen at about the time of the earthquake in China and which I don't want to withhold from you because I just find them to be amusing and because the events will be so illogical that I cannot gain any sense from them. 222. In St. Gallen, after a lengthy tour of Switzerland, an American singer and songwriter, Percy Sledge, will be betrayed by his manager, who will steal not only the singer's wages and escape therewith but also his bus and all of his musical instruments. 223. The theft of money makes some sense, but I think it is amusing that the vehicle and the musical instruments will also be stolen, which the manager can't begin to do anything with. 224. Just as incomprehensible and amusing, I think, is that in the zoological park of Copenhagen, a young elephant will be stolen, also at around the same time. 225. Despite the criminal aspects, I somehow find such incidents to be amusing because they only result from such illogicalness. 226. But enough with that because I still have to explain many other upcoming and important events to you. 227. Thus, it is to be said that after the earthquakes that were mentioned to occur in Indonesia and China, in South Africa, severe floods will afflict the country, while in Iceland, it will follow that a volcano will erupt, discharging immense masses of glowing lava. 228. This volcano, however, is located far away from inhabited areas, which is why no human lives will be taken and no damage will have to be deplored. 229. Then follows the first major political impact of the United States President Reagan, who will flip the world on its head with terroristic measures. 230. The first of his great acts will already become known at the end of the month of January 1981 and at the beginning of the month of February 1981, which is that he will reach out to murderous dictatorships and regimes of small countries and clear the way for them for the enslavement, oppression, and murder of their populations. 231. The military aid, which he will award to these countries, will produce very weighty and negative consequences. 232. Even with Russia, the new president will be speaking quarreling and angry words, which will bring the Russian government up in arms. 233. But this senselessness of the American president will not yet be enough because such actions only mean the beginning of his evil reign, during which he will destroy much hope for peace which had been laboriously developed a great deal since the end of the Second World War. 234. Thus, as the next blow of terror to Earth humanity, Reagan will bring the neutron bomb that was secured by the preceding President Carter into play, as he will want to let this weapon of terror be stationed in Europe. 235. This will have the consequence that Russia will advance its secret upgrades even more and will then bring an even more terrible weapon into play. 236. Reagan will provoke a lot of evil not only for the whole world but also for the people of the American states. 237. One of these evils is that he will undermine the security of the consumers of national goods. 238. A large consumer safety group will be attacked by Reagan, whereby the security of the consumers in America will soon begin to suffer, which will have as a consequence that the death rates caused by accidents will rise again because by Reagan's machinations, the security of the consumer goods in its structure, etc., will be neglected. Billy, you told me years ago that Reagan will be the actual author of the hitherto largest world arms race. Semjase, 239. Sure, he will be the man who will initiate the basic things that can then possibly lead to a third world war in the distant future. Billy, that will, however, not be carried out under the scepter of Reagan, or will it? Semjase, 240. No, and this represents good fortune for Earth humanity. 231. If he were to be the decisive word in such a war, then the entire Earth would be destroyed. Billy, which would probably correspond to an atomization? Semjase, 242. Yes. Billy, then hopefully, there will also be people who will recognize these things early. Semjase, 233. That will be the case, and his very inglorious end is already certain, as also that of the murderous Ayatollah Khomeini, whose end begins to be at hand in the first days of February 1981, when he is struck with an illness that he cannot be healed from, which will also happen to Reagan in a later time when he is struck by Alzheimer's disease and will have a tragic end. Billy, it will only bring about one less murderer in this world. But as a rule, nothing better follows such. Semjase, 234. Unfortunately, that is the truth, and it will still remain as such for a very long time. Billy, the world would, indeed, otherwise come to peace. Semjase, 235. Yes. And the imperious powers wouldn't like that. Billy, and these power twerps wouldn't like that. Semjase, 246. Sure, but now listen more. 237. Ayatollah Khomeini and his allies will, in the first months of 1981, play around with the idea that the Ayatollah should allow himself to be treated by notable physicians in Switzerland. 248. The realization of this attempt, however, is still presently questionable because no clear picture can be determined yet. 239. The Khomeini's brain functions are damaged, which is why with him, arbitrary actions and resolutions often go into action, which cannot be predicted in their final form very often. 250. For this reason, this occurrence in Switzerland cannot be predicted with any certainty, and neither can the trip of the Pope to Switzerland, who is concerned with the thought of visiting your mother country in the middle of the year 1981. 251. Certain factors of uncertainty are also present with the Pope, which could, at the least, postpone his trip. 252. On the whole, the entire year of 1981 holds a great deal of uncertain factors, which is why very precise numerical data can only be made on rare occasions, just as in other cases, which do not allow themselves to have absolute certainty as to whether a particular event will arrive now or not. 253. This, however, exclusively applies to events which have direct reference to people. 254. This is so only because in particular, the year 1981, in reference to the actions of people, will be controlled by such persons whose material consciousness and brains exhibit damages, which will lead to arbitrary, hot-tempered, and unpredictable actions. 255. This will also be the case with Prince Charles of England, who will become engaged to a certain Diana Frances Spencer, which will then lead to a marriage in the first half of the year if these plans are not wavered again by the instability of this man. 256. On the other hand, it would be very beneficial if Prince Charles would not marry this girl because when this marriage is actually realized, it will not run a happy course, especially not for Diana, who under the prevailing craze, adultery, intemperance, capriciousness, and other emotional outbursts of the prince, will have to suffer with difficulty, which will try to be concealed for a long time by the royal house by all means, until everything becomes official and a divorce takes place on August 28, 1996, according to which 1 year later, Diana will suffer a fatal accident in Paris. 257. Also uncertain in Spain is the matter, which is very insecure in its outcome, where attempts will be made to overthrow the government. 258. Approximately in the month of February, 1981, so our calculations show, the military will, in turn, try to seize the power for itself in that country. 259. According to our calculations, however, this coup attempt will have to fail because the best friend of King Juan Carlos cannot obtain his assistance. 260. But here Human beings also play a very important role, whose material consciousnesses are not fully functional and who have some damages to their brains. 261. For this reason, and accurate prediction in this case also cannot be ensured. 262. However, those events that are to be released naturally are to be determined very precisely, even when they often arise, in certain parts, at the fault of the earth people. 263. It is certain that shortly after February 20, 1981, the southern part of Greece will be shaken by a moderately severe earthquake. 264. The human losses, however, will not be high and will be limited to a maximum of about 250. 265. This earthquake, however, will truly only represent a continuation of those earthquakes that have their origin in Agadir, and that will move on to Italy, where the real big quakes will truly begin, and by what means the chain of earthquakes will no longer break off for a long time. 266. As explained, Greece will be the next country after Italy to be shaken, whereby in that place, as in Italy, an end to the quakes will not be found for a long time. 267. From Greece, the quakes will then move on to Japan, and in addition, Yugoslavia, South America, Russia, all the Balkan states, and also Europe will not be spared in the end. 268. Thus, Italy will be the actual starting point of that large chain of weak to most severe earthquakes, which will shake the earth from the end of 1980 and in the beginning of 1981 throughout many years until far into the third millennium, and bring death and destruction over the people, whereby the earth human being has contributed a lot to this and will further serve to encourage these quakes. 269. The beginning of this time of severe earthquakes is also connected with a large climatic overthrow, whereby this will already become apparent at the end of the year 1980 through a very harsh winter that will bring an unusually large amount of snow and will reach down into the areas of the desert of Sinai and the Sahara, whereby far areas of Africa will also have to suffer under this winter. 270. After that, over many decades, wild waters will appear all over the world, causing large areas of many countries to suffer from floods that suffer death, destruction, and annihilation. 271. Another fact that won't bring any more joy to the earth human being is that the earthly astronomers will unexpectedly admit that they were mistaken about the total size and expansion of the universe, and that they have discovered new galaxies in the universe of gigantic size and at great distances, of which they will suppose, until then, that the end of the universe would be there. Billy, so some will have to admit their mistakes once again, but that's nothing more than what is right. But can you explain to me why you said that the tragic end of the American president is already certain through the incurable Alzheimer's disease? Semjase, 272. I will tell you details about that later. 273. For now, I would like to address your question only so far that I tell you that this man's life is very endangered and that already shortly after his assumption of office, enigmatic enemies will be deployed who will want to assassinate him. 274. It is still too early to talk about this now because this does not fit into our chronological order of the list of coming events at this time. 275. At present, I stand with my explanations only in the initial months of the year 1981. 276. However, up to the middle of the year 1981, there are still many things to explain, which will happen on Earth within a great part of the framework and which will come into play. Billy, of course, I didn't want to anticipate you. It just occurred to me in such a way. That's why I asked you about it. Semjase, 277. I understand. Nevertheless, I would still like to retain a chronological order of the detailing of upcoming events. Billy, I also have nothing to object to that. Semjase, 278. There might not be sufficient time today to tell you about all of the important events of the nearer and more distant future. 279. I would then have to continue this at other times. Billy, I also don't have any objections against that. If your time is no longer sufficient, then you can simply tell me later about the remainder of these things. Semjase, 280. Sure, the time is, perhaps, not quite sufficient for me today because I have already used much time with what I have explained to you so far. Billy, then just some other time. Semjase, 281. No, there is something I can still tell you. 282. There is still some time that remains for me. Billy, I don't want to bring you into trouble. Semjase, 283. No, certainly not. I just have to take up my work again, which I could interrupt at a certain time for a visit with you. 284. It is, however, necessary that I return on time. Billy, I understand. Then you can really report more some other time. Semjase, 285. Sure, but only if I'm still not finished with my remarks today. 286. I still have some time. Billy, okay, but it's your responsibility. Semjase, 287. Sure. Billy, good, then I am still all ears. Semjase, 288. Thus, the following will come about. 289. Even during the outflow of the harsh winter season of 1980 to 1981, it will happen with complete certainty that in Italy, the Etna volcano will begin its unusual activity again, which was no longer the case for several decades, while at the same and following time, an unusually high amount of aircraft hijackings will be carried out in many different countries. 290. It will also be a time in which the aircraft hijackings will cause many deaths to be lamented over, as it will also be the case with the young people, who will revolt as terrorists and anarchists in many countries and occupy the buildings. 291. This will increase far into the future, as will also neo-Nazism in many countries, whereby the governing forces of the earth bear the guilt for the development of these occurrences. 292. They will allow false humanitarianism and an unwarranted, light for appearance to be made toward the youngsters, terrorists and anarchists, building occupiers, and revolters. 293. In the case of neo-Nazism, it will behave similarly, for through the unreasonableness of the governments, even though the machinations of the last World War should have finally been placed into oblivion, it will be handled oppositely, however, and neo-Nazism will rise again with great force. 294. The governments, filmmakers, and television producers will commit more madness in the coming time, showing the horrible atrocities of the last World War in films, movie theaters, and on television, and make these accessible to the people of Earth. 295. Through this, the minds of all of those people, who are not in agreement with their governments and social orders, will become excited, and thus, they will take the atrocious films and reports as a model and form and establish new movements of destruction. 296. This will already happen in an increased measure in the next year, so thus in 1981, while the following decades will bring the continuation of such. 297. The relevant governmental bodies are sufficiently deluded not to realize that these machinations of constant and renewed representations of the last World War would have to be prohibited by all means, and also that the public orienting of youth revolts would have to remain omitted, while the regulatory bodies would have to reach through hard. Billy, then we can expect a great deal in the next year and in the next decades. Only one thing still doesn't click for me in regards to your explanations. While you were talking, I thought of something in regards to your words which you said earlier, when you said that by mid-year of 1981, still many things will happen, which you would still have to explain to me before you can make further remarks about the American president. I have, indeed, been thinking about this man. I discovered in my calculations that what you said 10 minutes ago must still arrive before mid-1981, which is that the United States president is to be killed. Semjase, 298. Sure, that is correct. 299. The date and time of this incident are already certain and unavoidable, but I explained to you that I want to give the coming events in chronological order. 300. But, if you're so impatient, then I would be glad to omit several upcoming events, which will still occur before the assassination attempt is committed against Ronald Reagan. Billy, are they of such great importance? What are they? Semjase, 301. They are to be classified into the earthquakes that are only of incidental importance, primarily the continuous quakes that will occur in Italy and Greece. 302. Besides this, there are some greater criminal and felonious facts are to be mentioned, particularly a large series of murders in America, which will cause outrage all over the world because by the middle of 1981, about 30 black children will be killed there, and this number will only be the official claim. 303. The truth about the number of victims will be even more terrible, however. 304. This case will move the whole world, whereby different other homogeneous or similar cases will only find marginal interest, including one of a similar nature that will occur in England. Billy, these things don't seem to be very important to me because in this world, these are incidents that have been on the agenda for a long time. The human being simply takes it to knowledge, says and feigned indignation and feigned sympathy. Terrible, terrible, and then, it is soon dismissed and forgotten by him. Therefore, he does not give himself great thoughts about these things because they do not concern him. Only greater things such as earthquakes, wars, assassination attempts on prominent ones, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, epidemics, atom bombs, and new deadly technologies, etc. will make a few little impressions on him, but he will also not do anything about even these few items because to him, everything has ultimately happened too far away and, thus, it doesn't affect him directly. Thus, everything falls very fast into oblivion even with him. Semjase, 305. Then it would be quite unnecessary if I would continue to cite further occurrences. Billy, that isn't so, because greater and world-moving events, even if this movement is only momentary, can be made known to the public and brought to its attention through information bodies. And since you mentioned these events to me already a very long time before their arrival, various people will think about them and, perhaps, be of a better sense through this. Semjase, 306. That is logical. 307. Good, then I will give you the necessary information about the President of America. 308. It will be on the 30th of March at the time of 9:45 p.m., in front of the Hilton Hotel in the city of his speech, where the President will be shot down by a student named John Hinckley. 309. Ronald Reagan will suffer a shot to the wall of his lung. However, he will be healed surgically. 310. His injury will not bring direct mortal danger for him, while some of his companions, however, will be brought into direct mortal danger, including a security officer and Reagan's press spokesman, among other ones. Billy, and what time do you mean with 9:45 p.m.? Is this according to American time or our time? Semjase, 311. The time corresponds to Central European time, and to be sure, the statement applies to the amended time. Billy, I don't understand that. Semjase, 312. You know, nevertheless, that the so-called daylight savings time plays a large role in the countries of Europe. Billy, of course, but Switzerland has wisely kept itself from this for about 40 years. Semjase, 313. Sure, but in the year 1981, it will be reintroduced. Billy, that can't be true. That is idiocy, since such a change only brings tremendous financial expenses with itself and, moreover, absolutely no energy conservation, as the super clever imagine this. Semjase, 314. That is, unfortunately, correct, but the illogicalness of the people of Earth has previously had no end, not even before the dumbest stupidities. Billy, you have spoken a true word. Semjase, 315. Should I now tell you more? Billy, of course, because I still do not understand some things. You said, nevertheless, that Reagan, shortly after his assumption of office, will encounter profound enemies who will make themselves available against him in order to assassinate him. But now, you said that he will only be shot down by a single man, a student. Therefore, the danger for the president has not yet passed, and above all, it is also not clear to me as to whether or not he will still die after the surgery on his injury. You did not express yourself over this clearly because you only mentioned the fact that the shot wound would not be directly fatal. Semjase, 316. As always, you were very keen. 317. I actually only spoke of the direct shot wound, which American President Ronald Reagan will have to suffer, who can be healed again, however, by a surgical intervention lasting several hours. 318. The health condition of this man after the operation will be in a satisfactory state, but then, some complications will arise, which will make a second operation necessary. 319. The recovery for the president will only begin afterwards, according to which he can then exercise his duties again in about a 2-week time period. 320. Still, during his recovery time, the security bodies will discover that the assassin was, indeed, an outsider, but one who maintains contacts with other elements that are determined to kill the president. 321. In this connection, the arrests of certain suspects will then be made, which will not help the security bodies, however. 322. For this reason, the man will be further endangered because other elements will still stand against him before his election to the presidency and will be concerned with the thought of killing him, which is why he runs the risk of falling victim to another assassination attempt. Billy, then the possibility still exists that he will still be killed and depart from this life? Semjase, 323. This danger is quite great, but after the assassination attempt, security precautions will be so drastically tightened that he will escape the danger. 324. However, I want to explain to you the most important data about this at a later time. 325. For now, it is such that this President Reagan will be the empowered one who will bring the doubtful world peace that will only be laboriously preserved until then into wavering, for as a power-hungry person, he has been of the crazy acceptance for a long time that he can solve all problems through force, intrigues, and compulsion. 326. Already for a long time, he has lived with this delusional idea that America must become the most powerful, all-controlling, as well as worldwide military power. Thus, after his assumption of office, he will try to realize this crazy notion, whereby he will use every harmful means available to realize his erroneous plans. Billy, you said during a previous explanation that Reagan could virtually be a sign of a possibly coming downfall. Semjase, 327. Sure, because he will be that empowered one who brings the laboriously preserved and very doubtful world peace into wavering, for which several of his predecessors strove. 328. Thus, he is a bad sign for the beginning of the following armaments that will occur over the entire Earth, by which a third world war can then be struck during any later period in the third millennium. 329. In accordance with his crazy actions, everything in the world will line up very quickly even more toward terror and anarchism, for those who are misguided believe to recognize in his hunger for power and in his tyranny a means by which they could reach their confused and unrealistic goals. 330. Even on the so-called normal citizens, everything will have its effects, which will especially be terribly expressed in Switzerland, and that crime will dramatically increase at a very alarming rate, according to which, in the month of April 1981 alone, in your homeland, so many murders of people will be committed as what will be the case throughout the whole year of 1980? Billy, huh? Do you mean that in April of 1981, in Switzerland, there will be as many murders committed as altogether in the whole year of 1980? Semjase, 331. That's what I said. Billy, man oh man. That will be so cheerful. Semjase, 332. These are only the other following signs of the coming and slowly approaching global decline. 333. But the signs will pile up very rapidly after the recovery of the United States president, because soon after this, criminal elements in captivity will try to obtain a political status. 334. Irish Republican Army prisoners, murderers, and other serious criminals will try, with difficulty and through hunger strikes, to extort the British government in order to be able to be considered as political prisoners. 335. The Englishmen, however, will remain unyielding, according to which, in the first days of May, 1981, the first criminal hunger strike will die out, as it will already happen weeks before in Germany, where the same method of anarchist criminals will be used to extort the government. 336. But the hunger strike will also lead one criminal to his death, which will occur with the criminal Bobby Sands, who will be the first of the Irish Republican Army criminals to die of hunger, and then in a few days, the next striker will follow him to death. 337. But all this is only the beginning of the labor pains, starting in the year 1981, of the oncoming worldwide disaster, degenerated terrorism, and destruction, as well as various wars that will be released and waged worldwide by the USA, which will, for the time being, lead to the fact that the Earth will be afflicted by a very malignant, great arms race. 338. But this has already been inexorably set in motion. Thus, it can hardly be prevented anymore. 339. We will, indeed, do everything permissible to alleviate an impending catastrophe, but we cannot prevent it by force, as we are not authorized to intervene directly in the crazy machinations of the Earth people and their governments. 340. For this reason, we also cannot prevent or alleviate the assassination attempts on the so-called high-ranking personalities, to whom presidents and ministers, etc., will fall victim. And concerning these facts, Italy, as always, will hold a leading role through the criminal organization, Red Brigands, and the Mafia. 341. But the members of these political and criminal organizations will fatally prove to be strictly devout Catholics, and on May 13, 1981, a low blow will be dealt to them which will give them something to think about. 342. Namely, when their alleged spiritual head becomes seriously injured by an assassination attempt of a sought Turkish assassin. 343. But also Billy, do you mean that the Pope will be shot by an already known assassin? Semjase, 334. He will be dangerously injured by the assassination attempt, but I will tell you more about this later, because before this happens, there will still be some other things that will occur that should at least cause the people in Europe to pause for thought. 345. Thus, it will happen that at the end of the month of April, 1981, and in early May of 1981, in Austria, namely in Vienna, a head of the city will be shot, while afterwards, in Germany, a minister will also be robbed of his life by shots. Billy, and what are the names of these two? Semjase, 346. Their names are not important, and for certain reasons, I cannot officially reveal them. Billy, then just don't. Semjase, 337. You will also be less burdened through this. 348. But listen further, for 349. You know the truth about Israel and especially about its politics. 350. Due to Reagan's insane politics, Israel, which indeed wants to gain control of the country of Palestine by all means, will thereby allow itself to be misguided to reveal its true face. 351. Especially the criminal and national president, Begin, will betray his true German hostile attitude and will try to compromise the German politicians with lies and intrigues, and indeed he will do this already before the assassination attempt on the Pope will occur, and before, in France, the new national president named Mitterrand will be elected, who then likewise pursues a policy which leads toward the destruction of the nation and the earth, as will be the case with the American president, Reagan. 352. Only, the new French president will handle these matters differently than Reagan. Billy, you mean, therefore, that they, during the year 1981, will let the cat out of the bag? Semjase, 353. Sure, and indeed with absolute certainty. 354. But up to this point in time, the Germans will not realize that their reparation attempts, up to that hour, have been totally wrong, and that with Begin they have nourished a deadly brood of vipers at their bosom. 355. A brood of vipers of a quite especially poisonous kind, which constantly just aimed to forcefully pull everything into its possession, whatever it could get its hands on, with lies, deceit and intrigues, which has been the case for a long time with this man. 356. Perhaps those responsible ones in Germany, and in the other countries of the earth, will also finally recognize the truth, that namely the original forefathers of the Israelis pursued this murderous method, to make drunk in pretended friendship those to be exploited, in order to butcher and eliminate them in their drunken stupor. Billy, for those quick of hearing and honestly knowing and searching, this was already known for thousands of years. It is also indeed written in the Bible. Semjase, 357. Sure, but only for the quick of hearing and knowing ones. 358. The know-it-alls and fantasizers never want, however, to see this factual truth. 359. Perhaps the machinations of Begin in the year 1981 will finally bring about a change. Billy, this is therefore not yet certain. I mean, that this change will come? Semjase, 360. No, unfortunately not, and even if this should be the case, Israel will still gain the upper hand. 361. This also is the sign that the Pope in Rome will soon begin to make common cause with the government of the land of Israel, which essentially belongs to Arabia, by which the Pope would be stupid enough not to recognize that he also is only exploited by Israel's powermongers as a means to an end for their dark and opaque plans. 362. And just here I must briefly anticipate the chronology of events, because something will be planned, particularly in connection with Begin's defamation of the German politicians, which will express the true face and the true attitude of the Israeli powermongers even more blatantly than the insult against the Germans. 363. It will already be after the assassination attempt on the Pope, if the Israeli state powers will commit a further crime of world-provoking nature. 364. If namely Begin will insult the German politicians, he will only do so based on the calculation that he would be seen as a strong man who can afford to act in his criminal manner. 365. It will indeed be due to his behavior that various reprimanding voices will be raised in various nations, but they truly are not meant seriously. 366. Secretly, Menahem Begin will be, namely, admired and supported by those reprimanding him, whereby he will feel strong enough to drive his insults against the Germans to the utmost in order to win votes from his people. 367. These insults, of course, are based only on malicious lies, but they will be well thought out and aimed toward one purpose: to keep secret the next and, at that point in time, already planned crime. Namely, to lead a warlike offensive blow under the pretense of defense, against the nation of Iraq, whereby somewhere during the time between June 7th and 9th, 1981, the nation of Iraq will be criminally attacked and bombarded by the Israeli Air Force, whereby their target of destruction will be an atomic power plant under construction. Billy, hectares, and naturally the responsible ones of some nations will be artificially excited again to preserve appearances. Semjase, 368. Unfortunately, then it will also be so in this case. Billy Begin could then still reach his goal, because as usual Israel, due to falsely induced pity, reparations, and due to the false humanitarianism of the people, and so forth, can continue to drive Begin's murderous deeds and his mania to gain national control of Palestine. He actually does honor to his origin, Hebrean. As I know, this designation stems from the ancient Lyrian language and means gypsy, but this translation is not correct, because actually, Hebrean, in the ancient language, and therefore in Lyrian means Hebron and not Hebrean. But Hebron means the cast-off, or cast-out, scum. 5. Semjase, 369. Sure, that is correct, but now, continue to listen to what I will further report to you in chronological order and what I have already addressed. 370. Pope John Paul II will be severely injured by an assassination attempt, which will likewise lead to the uncertainty that has already been addressed as to whether he will carry out his trip to Switzerland or not. 371. Health-wise, this trip would, indeed, be quite possible for him after the assassination attempt, but the calculations do not show whether or not the responsible persons for the trip will approve of a trip to Switzerland at this time. 372. The likelihood is that the trip will be cancelled and rescheduled. 373. A repeated murderer of Turkish nationality, by the name of Ahmet Alyaka, will have to bear the responsibility for the assassination attempt on the Pope, who will make several shots at the Pope and severely injure him. 374. Although the injury will be severe, the Pope will survive the attack and the quick surgery that will follow. 375. According to our calculations, this will happen during the period from the 12th to 14th of May, where the 13th of May of 1981, around the time of 5:17 p.m., is the greatest probability. 376. The Pope, and this is entirely certain, will survive, but only a week later, the Pope's bosom friend, Cardinal Wyszynski of Poland, will end his life, who, until then, will have driven his sectarian regime there for many years. 377. The Cardinal's death will take place around the same time when President Reagan's assassin will make a failing suicide attempt with medicines. Billy, oh, so he will want to kill himself. Semjase, 378. With certainty, but the attempt will remain just as such, as I explained. 379. Only a few days after these incidents will the government again turn to the country of Iran, in order to excite the interest of the world public again. Billy, it will probably start again as a result of this Khomeini. Semjase, 380. It will be something like that because some other time, he will incite the Iranian people against the leadership, this time against the President Bani Sadr, who will take over this role as a politically moderate person in Iran. 381. This means that he won't pursue the murderous lines of the insane Ayatollah and will, thus, slowly fall into disgrace with this and with the people. 382. His fall will take place in the time between the 10th and the 15th of June 1981, whereby he will then be forced to flee. 383. The Iranian people and a blood judge will rise up against him and demand his death. Billy, thus, the usual approach of underage criminals and mentally incompetent ones. Semjase, 384. Sure. 385. This event in Iran will not be the only one at this time because only hours after the attack on President Bani Sadr, in the south of the same country, a severe earthquake will take the lives of 7,000 people. Billy, and where will this earthquake take place? Semjase, 386. According to our calculations, in the area around Kerman, in a region, thus, that you know very well. Billy, yes, I was there several times and also for a longer period of time. Semjase, 387. That is well known to me. 388. But now, continue to listen, because there is still a third event that will follow these two that were mentioned, but this will happen in England. 389. This event will be a sign of the fact that the prophecies of Petal, which you have written down concerning England, will begin to fulfill themselves in the first phases. Billy, then it probably just concerns the assassination attempt on the Queen, which you mentioned to me once as that sign of the times, which should be the basic beginning of the beginnings of fulfillments of the prophecies. Semjase, 390. Your memory is as good as ever. 391. Yes, only a short time after the devastating earthquake in Iran, the Queen of England will be attacked by a not yet 20-year-old adolescent, but the Queen won't receive any injuries and will escape with fright. 392. This is because the firearm of the youth will only be loaded with deceptive ammunition. Billy, do you mean that the assassination weapon will only contain blank bullets? Semjase, 393. Sure. Billy, I don't understand that. Semjase, 394. This is its special reasons, but they are not supposed to be mentioned officially. Billy, then just don't. Semjase, 395. Around the 18th to 19th of June, 1981, the Israeli president will be able to achieve his first success with regard to his insidious attack on the nuclear power plant in Iraq because the illusory reproaches of various countries will lead to the result that no sanctions will be taken against Begin in Israel, which will entice him to charge the German politicians as being criminals and as the ones responsible for the anti-Semitic machinations in the last World War, and this time, he will even go so far as to make the entire German people responsible for this. Billy, typical. Semjase, 396. Sure, but continue to listen to what will happen. 397. The month of June, 1981 calls for a severe earthquake in Iran, in the region of Kerman, causing around 1,300 deaths. Following this, on the 23rd of June, a bomb assassination attempt will take place on the Iranian cabinet in Tehran. 398. The result will be that approximately 70 people will die, whereby one of Khomeini's horrible mass murderers will also be killed, the blood judge Kakali. 399. Only a month later, on July 28, Iran will once again be shaken by a major quake, again in the region of Kerman, but this time, it will demand 7,200 deaths, while several cities and villages will fall to the ground. 400. Only shortly after the assassination attempt in Tehran, another severe earthquake will shake the Philippines. 401. The earthquake will be connected with a volcanic eruption, and about 130 humans will fall victim to this. Billy, then this time alone will do a great deal of diverse things. There is probably also the madman of Qom, Khomeini, who will begin his mass executions again, after all that you said in reference to Iran. Semjase, 402. That will, unfortunately, be the case because many hundreds will soon fall victim to the insanity of this man. Billy, it cannot be otherwise with such degeneracy. Semjase, 403. Unfortunately, that is correct. 404. But continue to listen. 405. I already told you about the severe quake in China, which can be expected, in particular, in the area around Sichuan. 406. After the events that you mentioned earlier, this Chinese seismic zone will suffer from severe floods, resulting in deaths that will amount to about 4,700. 407. It will also be the time during which the murderous and criminal Israeli president of the state, Menachem Begin, will again be confirmed into his office, according to which he will immediately command and carry out new murderous attacks on the neighboring countries. 408. This time, bomb attacks on the Lebanese capital will be part of the plan, which will cause hundreds of deaths to be lamented over as a result of several attacks by the Israeli Air Force. 409. This will be a result of the greed-driven madness of Begin and will be further proof that the people of Begin all around the earth can practically allow themselves to do anything under the protection of his powerful, allied, large and small countries because the leaders of these countries are blind to the true plans of Israel. Billy, but when will this heinous one become more clever and finally smell the roast? Semjase, 410. This will, unfortunately, still take a very long time. Billy, okay, go on. Semjase, 411. Up to and by the end of June, 1981, two facts will arise in your homeland, Switzerland, which are worth mentioning. 412. In the first half of the year 1981, it will result in Switzerland similarly as with the murder cases, in that the number of drug-related deaths will rise so high in the first 6 months of the year that at the end of June, it will be as high as it was in the entire year of 1980. 413. Then, beginning in the middle of July, Switzerland would be inflicted by terrorists, who will move the population into fear and fright through a whole number of bomb attacks in different cities and places, whereby, unfortunately, many humans will be injured, quite apart from the millions worth of property damages. Billy, then Switzerland can expect a great deal, and I would like to say, however, that the entire population and, above all, the government, are the ones who bear the greatest guilt if these things actually arrive. The indifference of the Swiss population and of the government makes such things possible, but so do the false legislation and the false humanitarianism. Semjase, 414. That is absolutely correct, but this applies not only to Switzerland but also to all countries of the earth where such occurrences can go into effect. 415. These things, however, are well known not only to us but also to every thinking earth human being who deals with the real facts. Billy, that is clear. Nevertheless, these ones still don't want to recognize the truth. Semjase, 416. That corresponds to the truth, but now, let me mention those important things that will report themselves as world moving in the future. 417. These coming events are already known to you in some cases, but in certain parts, also only in a few details. 418. Concerning Iran, the end of Khomeini is well known to you, which begins to be at hand with the fall of Bani Sadr. 419. The arising bomb assassination attempts, which I already explained to you and which will cause many close friends of the insane dictator to depart from this life, will actually constitute only the beginning of the irrevocable downfall. 420. After the first attack in Tehran, in which the blood judge of Persia and many governing bodies will find death, there will soon follow a second, in which the lives of the president and one of his ministers will be taken away. Billy: I have calculated once before that this man will be called President Ratsai or something similar. Is that right? Semjase, 421. Your calculation was inaccurate, though not completely. 422. Anyhow, he will find death through another bomb attack. 423. The political forms will change again through this, and new mass executions will reveal Persia's bloody way that will be dictated by the insane dictator Khomeini. 424. The ensuing mass executions in Iran will no longer move into the first part of 1,000. Rather, they will move into the thousands, and children will no longer be spared but will be shot on the open roads by the captors, who call themselves Revolutionary Guards. 425. But this, in turn, will mean that already at this time, an underlying civil and fratricidal war will be broken out, which will find its origin and stirring up with Bani Sadr, who will call into being a resistance movement in France against Khomeini. Billy: Crazy, because Bani Sadr, as you said, is designated by Khomeini himself as an ally and, with this, has also been in exile in France for the past few years. Semjase, 426. That is correct, only this time, Bani Sadr will no longer be for Khomeini but against him, whereby he will initiate everything in order to let him be murdered. Billy: Then this should probably be the third assassination attempt? Semjase, 427. Your question confuses me? Billy: I mean that first, an assassination attempt on President Reagan will be carried out. Then, after that, there will be another on the Pope, after which then, the third attempt should follow in the course of only a few months, if I am properly oriented. Semjase, 428. You confuse the facts because Khomeini's death does not take place in the period mentioned, as you know, because this event will only happen later. Billy: Sorry. Of course. I have confused things. But on whom is the third assassination attempt committed then? Semjase, 429. I would have just said this if you had not interrupted me. Billy: That wasn't my intention. Semjase, 430. This assassination attempt will be committed on the President of Egypt, during a military parade, if the conditions for it do not change. 431. Sadat will be attacked and even killed on Tuesday, October 6, 1981 on the VIP platform of the Cairo military square of Abbasija, by members of the army itself. 432. There will be 10 to 12 deaths as a result of the attack to lament over. In addition, some assassins will die by the defense forces. 433. Several diplomats and a church dignitary, who will likewise be on the very unsatisfactorily secured VIP platform, will not escape the attack and will be affected. 434. The attack will be implemented by Egyptian soldiers who are members of the Army for the Freedom of Egypt movement and the Muslim Brotherhood, who will also stand in the pay of the Libyan and Mat ruler Gaddafi. 435. The actual origin of all of this, however, comes from Begin. 436. The Mighty One of Israel, Menachem Begin will be the actual manipulator behind the assassination of Sadat, who will believe unto death that the powerful and insidious murderer is actually a good friend, but Begin truly isn't such. 437. Sadat is already too focused now on honest peace for Begin and also isn't unrelenting enough for Begin's ends, so this one will have him assassinated by secret agents whom he has bought, who can work towards this undetected in the ranks of Gaddafi as well as of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Freedom Army. 438. Gaddafi, who is stupid, and the Muslim Brotherhood and the Freedom Army are by no means clever enough to know that secret agents purchased by Begin already exist now and have already existed for a long time in their own ranks and carry out their mischief directed by Begin. 439. Begin, who is a man full of meanness, falsehood, lies, intrigue, and murderous thoughts, must let the Egyptian president be assassinated because this one doesn't fit into his criminal country domination plans. 440. Sadat, however, is still very focused and unrelenting in his blind confidence, so Begin hopes that a non-goal-oriented man will become Sadat's successor when he allows his assassination. Billy, can also nothing be done to prevent all this? Semjase, 431. An attempt with a visit would be exceptionally permitted to you if you want to do this. 442. However, you can't change anything, so be aware of this. 443. It is always difficult for you to remain silent and to wait passively, I know. 434. But don't be disappointed. Billy, I will write a letter to Sadat to warn him. I just hope, then, that he also receives it. Semjase, 435. For that, I will endeavor myself and ask Quetzal for his help because from next spring, I will be absent for some time. 446. Your visit to Sadat, however, should not take place any earlier than what is good for your safety. 447. July 28, 1981 would be suitable for this purpose, and your visit could be carried out unhindered. 448. I calculated this date in foresight because I know your reactions very well and wanted to present this proposal to you anyways. 449. You can then talk to the president for some time, so you don't need a letter. 450. Quetzal will be concerned about the fact that you can talk to the president for about 20 minutes undisturbed and unseen. 451. Be aware, however, that your visit to Sadat can have major consequences, for he will try to stop the unstoppable by carrying out a large-scale wave of arrests among his reachable enemies. 452. This will occur as a result of your explanations that you will give him. Billy, that would be very good. The assassins would then be captured before they could strike. Semjase, 453. You are illogical because what has to happen will happen. 454. With the coming events, nothing is to change. Billy, nevertheless, I would like to try this. Semjase, 455. You know that this is impossible, but you actually must learn this yet another time, even though you know the unavoidable and unchangeable truth. 456. You are sometimes very strange in these things, even though you know much. Billy, I know, because for me, everything, indeed, goes too much to the kidneys. To know the future is damn hard, especially when one must remain silent about it. And besides this, damn it, I kind of like Sadat, and therefore, I feel quite windy and dishonest. Semjase, 457. Sure, but there is nothing to change in this, unfortunately. 6. Billy, I know, and that's probably how it'll stay because the people on Earth are not likely to alter their ways so quickly and accept the truth that changes could still be invoked, for the better, I mean. Semjase, 458. While you are not permitted to speak about it at this point so as to endanger the success, it is still advisable that great efforts be made to change various future incidents for the positive, although they seem to be inevitable now. 459. Toward the latter part of 1983 or spring of 1984, we are planning to introduce an effective peace meditation to benefit Earth, its inhabitants, and events that will occur there. Included in this effort will be everyone on ERA and many members from our Federation, who total will comprise more than 3.5 billion humans. 460. This will produce an extremely powerful energy force through which the terrestrials and their actions, hence their occurrences, should be influenced and political confusion resolved. These efforts will also lead to freeing Russia and other countries from their current dictatorship status. 461. The procedures have been instituted and mandated by the High Council, who have found a permissible method to intervene using a particular cosmic clause that could be used to influence terrestrial affairs. 462. As part of the result brought about by these peace efforts, the inhumane wall will fall, which currently divides Germany into two separate countries, thus the two sectors will be reunited into one. 463. Every group member is asked to help, for the strength and initiative of each and every last one is imperative, as is the assistance of other humans on Earth who will voluntarily join you in this effort. 464. In this regard, you are only permitted to speak about the peace meditation and its purpose in the peace effort. You may not mention the issues I previously told you about and which I specifically named just now. 465. Should you not adhere to these instructions and speak about these items, you will not only jeopardize all efforts in this direction, but the anticipated successes commencing in 1987 will not occur either. They may even transform into something negative. Billy, what a thought. Of course, I'll sit on my mouth. But, do you actually think that the dictatorships on Earth will come to an end in the next decade, and that the wall in the DDR, German Democratic Republic, will come down? Semjase, 466. This is as good as certain, although World War III will still be a threat, in addition to many other forms of tragedies. 467. Success will follow as long as we conscientiously and systematically perform the peace meditation. Beginning with 1987, many other things will change, for the positive that is. 468. However, the first tangible and substantial successes will only become evident in 1988, and within a very brief time afterward, they will begin to solidify to the point where the first major uprisings will begin in 1989, and terrestrials will experience their temporary apex in 1990. 469. But I must state once again that you must remain silent on these matters for now. Billy, I will do that. There is no way that I am going to endanger all of these future efforts. Semjase, 470. Only time will tell the success rate these efforts will bring. Billy, slowly some hope is rising within me, and I will put all of this into the drawer of my lost memories so I don't endanger anything. Semjase, 471. You will be permitted to speak about everything when the events become more apparent. Billy, by then I'll have forgotten it all. So it looks like as the end of the 1980s approaches, we soon can expect some rays of hope in regards to a worldwide improvement of freedom and peace. Then the world will look a bit better. Semjase, 472. Yes, so it will. But now I must leave. 473. Moreover, you are tired. 474. Goodbye. 7. Billy, good, and quite loving thanks, girl. Greet everyone rather nicely and dearly for me, and so then, Until Thursday or Friday. Bye.